At Hollowmere Convent, sleep was not merely a biological necessity, but a sacred surrender, a nightly laying down of will and memory before a higher power, a quiet admission that even the most devoted servant must eventually release control and drift into darkness. And yet, within those ancient stone walls, there existed one presence for whom sleep was neither comfort nor blessing, one presence who never closed her eyes, never sought rest, and never allowed herself the smallest mercy of unconsciousness. Her name was Sister Althea, and no one living could remember a time when she had not been awake. The elder nuns spoke of her in careful voices, explaining that when they had arrived as trembling novices, they had already been warned about the sleepless sister, and that their own elders had been warned in turn, and that the chain of whispered knowledge seemed to stretch backward without beginning, as though Sister Althea's vigil existed outside ordinary history, looping endlessly through the generations like a story that refused to find its origin. Sister Althea was always present in the convent, always occupying spaces where silence grew thickest, always standing or kneeling in shadow with her hands folded and her eyes open. And whether it was dawn, midday, dusk, or the deepest hour of night, she appeared unchanged, untouched by fatigue, untouched by time, untouched by any weakness that might make her seem human. At Hollowmere, the corridors twisted gently rather than running straight. The walls bowed slightly inward, and the ceilings pressed low, creating the constant impression that the building itself leaned close to listen, while outside the surrounding forest pressed against the stone like a living boundary, its ancient trees arching overhead, their branches tangled so densely that sunlight rarely reached the ground in full. When Sister Mara arrived at Hollowmere Convent, carrying nothing but a small cloth bag and a heart hollowed by grief she did not yet have language for, she told herself that she had chosen this place because she wanted silence, because she wanted discipline, because she wanted to disappear into something structured and simple. But beneath those sensible reasons lay another truth she did not dare speak, which was that Hollowmere felt forgotten, and forgotten places promised a certain kind of safety for those who wished to vanish. Mother Superior greeted her at the gates with a weary smile and eyes that looked as though they had watched too many things pass. "You will find peace here," she said, though her voice carried the fragile hope of someone repeating a wish rather than stating a certainty. On Mara's first evening, Sister Judith guided her through a maze of dim corridors to a narrow cell at the far end of the eastern wing, where a small bed stood beneath a slit window and a crooked crucifix hung above a plain wooden desk, its surface polished smooth by countless nervous hands. Before leaving, Sister Judith hesitated, her fingers resting lightly on the doorframe, and told Mara in a low voice that there was one rule she must never break, which was never to wander the halls after lights out. And when Mara nodded, Sister Judith added something stranger still, telling her that if she ever happened to see Sister Althea, she must not speak to her, must not approach her, and must not ask questions. Mara slept poorly that first night, waking repeatedly with the unsettling sensation that something unseen lingered just beyond her field of vision, though each time she forced her eyes open, she found only darkness and silence. She saw Sister Althea for the first time at morning prayers, standing alone at the back of the chapel, her habit darker than the others, her face pale in a way that resembled old wax rather than living skin, and her eyes already open, already fixed, already watching. And Mara felt a strange certainty settle into her bones that Sister Althea had noticed her long before Mara became aware of her presence. As days passed, Mara encountered Sister Althea again and again, always alone, always silent, always occupying spaces no one else seemed eager to claim, such as the unlit corners of the library, the unused west stairwell, and the far pews of the chapel, where shadows gathered thickest. And no matter how early Mara rose or how late she remained awake, Sister Althea appeared unchanged, never slumped, never sluggish, never distracted. Mara learned quickly that Sister Althea never ate in the refectory, never attended communal confession, never accepted duties that required coordination with others. And yet her presence was treated as necessary, even essential, though no one could explain exactly why. When Mara asked another novice about her, the girl hesitated before whispering that Sister Althea kept vigil, though over what she did not know. Unease began to settle into Mara's thoughts like dampness seeping into stone. One night, lying awake and staring into darkness, Mara heard slow footsteps outside her door, soft and unhurried, pausing directly in front of her cell. And though terror urged her to remain still, curiosity compelled her to listen, as the steps eventually resumed and faded down the corridor, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than before. In the morning, Mara noticed faint, damp footprints on the stone floor that ended at her threshold. From that moment, Mara began searching the convent's records, spending her free hours in the low-ceilinged archives beneath the chapel, where shelves sagged beneath the weight of centuries of journals, burial ledgers, and correspondence, and where dust drifted constantly through thin shafts of light like slow-falling ash. She found Sister Althea's name again and again, written in countless different hands, across decades and centuries. Sister Althea, appointed night watch. Sister Althea continues her vigil. Sister Althea does not require rest. There was no birth record, no arrival date, no death notice. In a brittle journal hidden inside a rotting leather cover, Mara discovered a passage written in cramped script that made her hands tremble. She says sleep is a door, and she says if she closes her eyes, something else will open its own, and she says it waits for the moment we surrender. That night, Mara dreamed of standing in a vast black chamber, its floor slick beneath her bare feet, while above her loomed a colossal shape that breathed slowly, each exhale carrying the stench of rot and wet earth. And between Mara and that impossible presence stood Sister Althea, her back rigid, her body trembling as though every muscle strained to hold something back. "Do not sleep," Sister Althea whispered. Mara woke gasping, only to realize that she was not alone, because Sister Althea sat in the chair beside her bed, her eyes open, her expression unchanged, her presence so silent it felt unreal. "I won't," Mara whispered. Sister Althea rose and left without sound. From then on, Mara began to notice how often sisters woke screaming in the night, how others forgot simple prayers or stared into space with hollow expressions, how one novice vanished entirely, and how Mother Superior claimed she had been sent away for medical care, though Mara later found the girl's rosary beneath the west stairwell, tangled in a dark stain that smelled faintly of iron. Mara confronted Sister Althea in the chapel one evening, asking what happened when they slept, and Sister Althea answered simply that they listened. And when Mara asked who listened, Sister Althea said the ones beneath. When Mara asked why Sister Althea never slept, the woman whispered that she remembered what happened the last time she did, because she had opened her eyes somewhere else. That night, Mara decided she would not sleep. She lit a candle, knelt beside her bed, and prayed as hours passed and exhaustion pressed down on her like a physical weight, while whispers seeped through the walls, growing clearer, shaping themselves into words that begged her to close her eyes. Shadows stretched along the walls, forming shapes that resembled limbs and faces, and panic clawed at her chest until the door burst open, and Sister Althea entered, placing a cold hand on Mara's forehead and telling her to stay awake. The shadows recoiled, the whispers faded. In the pale light of dawn, Mara noticed dark veins spreading beneath Sister Althea's skin, like cracks in porcelain, and when Mara whispered that she was dying, Sister Althea replied that she was being emptied, that whatever still belonged to her was slowly being taken. Weeks passed, and Sister Althea grew thinner, weaker, slower, while the nights grew louder, the whispers more insistent, the screams more frequent, until one evening Mara found Sister Althea collapsed in the chapel, her eyes still open but unfocused, her voice barely audible as she admitted she was tired and that she had never been meant to do this alone. Mara understood then that Sister Althea had been waiting for someone to replace her, that the convent had always required a watcher, a living barrier, a mind that never surrendered. That night, Mara sat beside Sister Althea, listening as the whispers rose and shadows thickened. And when Sister Althea's breathing slowed and her eyelids fluttered, Mara placed her hands gently over Sister Althea's eyes and promised that she would stay awake. For the first time in centuries, Sister Althea slept. Her body crumbled into ash. The whispering stopped. The shadows retreated. Morning came. Mara stood in the chapel, eyes open, unblinking. When new novices arrive at Hallowmere Convent and ask about the young nun who never seems to sleep, who always stands in shadow with eyes wide open, they are told only that she keeps vigil, that she always has, and that she always will. Sleep well. But if you hear something breathing beneath your floor tonight, do not close your eyes. No one at St. Brigid's Monastery rang the bells after midnight. Not since the winter of 1912. Not since Sister Agnes vanished inside the tower and left behind only questions that no prayer ever managed to answer. And though the rule itself was carved into the oak door of the bell chamber in fading Latin, and later translated into trembling English, few of the women who lived within those ancient walls truly knew what had happened that night, only that the bells were meant to be rung by the living, and whatever rang them now did not belong to the world of breath and warmth. St. Brigid's rose from a ridge of stone above a forest that never seemed to change its posture or its color, a forest that remained dark, even beneath summer sun, whose branches leaned inward as if forever listening, while fog gathered between the trunks no matter the season, drifting upward toward the monastery like a slow, patient tide. The building itself looked less constructed than grown, its corridors bending at uneasy angles, its narrow windows set deep into thick stone like blind eyes, its towers stretching skyward with the weary patience of something that had been standing long before anyone remembered why. When Clara arrived, carrying nothing but a single suitcase and the dull ache of having nowhere else to go, she was told that St. Brigid's was quiet, that it was peaceful, that it was a place where troubled minds could find stillness. And she believed them because she wanted to believe in places that could still offer shelter. She was 19 years old, newly orphaned, exhausted by grief in a way that made everything feel distant and hollow. And when the letter came offering her work as a lay assistant cleaning, organizing records, helping in the kitchens, she accepted without hesitation, barely noticing the small line printed at the bottom of the page. If you hear the bells at night, remain in your room until morning. On her first evening, Sister Margaret, a thin woman with kind eyes and a careful limp, guided Clara through a maze of dim hallways until they reached a narrow room on the eastern wing, where a small bed sat beneath a single window overlooking the endless forest. Curfew was at 10, morning prayers at 5, supper at 6, and as Sister Margaret handed her the brass key, she hesitated just long enough to make Clara uneasy before quietly adding that if Clara ever heard bells after midnight, she must not investigate, must not step into the corridor, must not open her door for any reason. Clara smiled and promised, though she did not yet understand why her promise felt heavier than it should have. During the day, St. Brigid's almost resembled an ordinary monastery, as the nuns moved through their routines with gentle discipline, speaking little, praying often, tending a small courtyard garden that stubbornly refused to flourish, while Clara spent most of her hours dusting long unused rooms and sorting through ancient ledgers in the archives below the monastery. The archives lay at the bottom of a spiraling stone staircase, where the air grew steadily colder with each step and carried the layered scent of parchment, mildew, and something faintly metallic, like old coins or dried blood. And it was there, among cracked leather spines and brittle pages, that Clara first began to sense that St. Brigid's history had not been preserved so much as buried. Many journals ended abruptly, others contained names violently scratched out, and some margins were crowded with frantic handwriting that did not match the careful script of the main entries. as though different hands had fought for control of the same page. One afternoon, Clara discovered a ledger dated 1912 containing a single unsettling line. Sister Agnes assigned solitary tower duty. Beneath it, written in darker ink, were the words. She rang them anyway. That night, Clara heard the bells. At first, she thought she was dreaming, because the sound seemed to rise from inside her body rather than from the distant tower, a deep and hollow toll that vibrated through her mattress and settled into her bones. She lay perfectly still as the bell rang again and again, slow and deliberate, as though someone were counting something that could not be undone. The bells rang 13 times, not 12, not any recognized hour. When silence finally returned, Clara realized her hands were clenched so tightly they ached. At breakfast, she told Sister Margaret what she had heard, and though no one reacted with visible shock, a subtle tension passed through the room like a cold breath, while Sister Margaret only asked whether Clara had remained in her room, and nodded once when she said yes. From that point on, Clara noticed things she might previously have dismissed, such as doors that were locked at night, but standing open by morning, cold drafts that slipped through sealed corridors, and faint humming that sometimes echoed behind walls where no door existed. The second time Clara heard the bells, she also heard footsteps, slow and bare against stone, moving past her door toward the tower. And when she dared to peer through the keyhole, she saw a nun walking alone down the candlelit corridor, her head bowed, her skin gray like candle wax, her body moving with the patience of something that no longer needed to hurry. By morning, Clara knew she could not remain silent. Sister Margaret finally told her the truth, or at least the shape of it, explaining that St. Brigid's had been built atop land once used for older rituals, that long before the monastery existed, people believed something slept beneath the hill, something that demanded offerings, and that Sister Agnes had come to believe the bells were the voice of that buried presence. Agnes had listened. Agnes had obeyed. Agnes had begun bringing people to the tower. When the monastery tried to stop her, Agnes locked herself inside, and the bells rang for 3 days without pause. When they finally fell silent, Agnes was gone. No body was ever found. That night, when Clara tried to leave, she discovered that every exit had been sealed, and as panic rose in her throat, the bells erupted into wild, frantic ringing while the corridors filled with nuns who were not alive, their empty eyes fixed on her, their mouths opening together in a single trembling hum. Sister Agnes stepped forward from the crowd, her cracked smile stretching wider than human skin should allow. "She is hungry," Agnes whispered. They dragged Clara to the tower. They showed her the mouth beneath the bells. They offered her to it. By morning, Clara's room was empty. A new voice hummed in the tower, and the bells rang 13 times. Have you ever heard a silence so loud it deafens you? Imagine this. A forgotten convent, abandoned for decades, its history sealed within crumbling stone. It's midnight. You find yourself standing at the entrance to its chapel, a place where prayers have long since faded into dust. The air is thick, heavy, like a shroud you can almost touch. It carries the scent of cold stone, decaying wood, and something else, something ancient and expected. You step inside. The darkness is absolute, a physical presence that presses in from all sides. Then your eyes adjust, drawn to a faint, flickering light. Dozens of candles, maybe more, are scattered throughout the chapel. Their flames dance and tremble, not from any breeze, but as if startled by your arrival. They cast long, distorted shadows that writhe and crawl across the walls, morphing into shapes your mind refuses to recognize. The rows of wooden pews are like skeletal remains, stretching into an abyss of shadow that swallows the back of the room whole. At the far end, before the altar, stands a figure. A nun. She's dressed in a severe black habit, a silhouette against the wavering candlelight. Her back is to you. She is perfectly, unnaturally still. While the candle flames shiver and the shadows perform their grotesque ballet, she remains motionless. She isn't kneeling. Her head isn't bowed in prayer. She just stands there, a statue carved from midnight. It's not the stillness of reverence. It's the stillness of something listening with an intensity that chills you to the bone. You strain your ears, trying to hear what she hears. But there is only silence. A profound, suffocating silence that seems to absorb all sound. And yet, beneath that oppressive quiet, there's something else. A soft, rhythmic sound. It's breathing. A slow, steady inhale and exhale. It's not yours. Your own breath is caught in your throat. A painful knot of fear. The breathing isn't coming from the nun, either. She is as still as death. The sound seems to emanate from the very air around you, from the shadows themselves. You take a tentative step forward, the sound of your shoe on the stone floor, echoing like a gunshot in the unnatural quiet. The nun doesn't react. She doesn't flinch. Her rigid posture remains unbroken. It's as if you don't exist, as if your presence is utterly insignificant. This lack of acknowledgement is more terrifying than any sudden movement would be. You are an intruder in a ritual you cannot comprehend. The camera of your mind begins to slowly zoom in, pulling you closer against your will. You notice the details. The fine layer of dust on the pews, undisturbed for years, yet the candles are freshly lit. Who lit them? The air grows colder, a damp chill that seeps into your clothes, into your skin, a coldness that feels ancient and malevolent. The breathing continues, a constant, intimate presence in the vast, empty space. Inhale, exhale, a sound without a source. Your gaze is locked on the nun. You want to see her face, to understand what holds her in this trance. You want to call out, to break the spell, but your voice is gone, stolen by the oppressive atmosphere. The closer you get, the more the feeling of dread intensifies. It's not a fear of physical harm. There are no monsters lurking in the pews, no ghouls waiting to jump out. This is something deeper, something psychological. It's the horror of the unknown, the terror of standing on the precipice of a reality you were never meant to witness. The shadows on the walls seem to coalesce, their dance becoming more deliberate, forming patterns that hint at long limbs and gaunt faces before dissolving back into chaos. The candlelight flickers violently now, threatening to plunge the chapel into total darkness, leaving you alone with the breathing and the silent, listening nun. You feel an overwhelming urge to turn and run, to flee back into the safety of the night. But you're frozen, held captive by the scene, by the need to know what she is waiting for. What happens if she turns around? What face will you see? Or will there be no face at all? The question hangs in the air, as heavy as the scent of decay. The breathing seems to get closer, right beside your ear now, a soft, wet sound. You feel a pressure change, the air displacing as if something large and unseen is moving past you, heading towards the altar, heading towards her. The nun still doesn't move. She is the calm center of a storm of supernatural energy. She is the anchor. Or perhaps she is the beacon, the one who called this presence here. You realize with a sickening lurch that you haven't stumbled upon this scene by accident. You are meant to be here. You are the audience. The silence breaks, not with a scream, but with a whisper. A single sibilant word that seems to come from the nun, from the shadows, from your own mind, all at once. A name you've never heard, but somehow recognize with primal terror. And then, one of the candles at the very front of the altar sputters and dies. Then another, and another. The darkness begins to reclaim its territory, inch by creeping inch, swallowing the light, moving from the altar outwards, towards you. The breathing stops. The absolute, crushing silence returns, but this time it feels different. It's not empty anymore. It's full. It's waiting. The last candle flickers, its tiny flame fighting a losing battle. And in that final, dying light, you see the nun's head begin to slowly, deliberately turn. What horrors lie in the shadows of our own minds? Sometimes the scariest stories are the ones that leave the most to the imagination. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy exploring the unsettling and the unknown, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. We'll see you in the next shadow.